Hello, and welcome to this session titled Method of Forecasting with Misha Yagudin. I'm Zukit Chen, and I'll be the MC for this session. Following Misha's presentation, we'll move on to a live Q&A session where we will respond to your questions. You can submit questions through the swap card live discussion feature. Then, after 15 minutes, we'll bring this session to an end. But now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this session. When I was drafting up an introduction, I was really amazed by the things Misha has done. Currently, Misha is running our research with Gavin Leach and EA Research Consultancy. They've done projects for OpenPhil, among others. He is kicking off Sage with Eli Laughlin, an organization scaling and improving the forecasting ecosystem. With Nuno Semper and Eli Laughlin, he forecasts as part of his somewhat spitzy forecasting. In the past, he was a summer fellow at FHI, the Future for Humanity Institute. In this talk, Misha will combine his experience as a forecaster with the philosophy of science to answer questions ranging from how do I even start forecasting to how robust is the knowledge we obtain from forecasters to should we trust forecasting or should we wait for science to emerge? Misha, over to you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here and talking to you guys. Forecasting became quite prominent in the effective altruism movement, partly because we want to know about the future, how different technologies will play out, what is the quantified assessment of different risks, so we can guide their action and improve the world. But the question also we can ask, how do you do it? How do you do it? What the way to do it right? Is there any? Is forecasting robust, or is it just a bunch of people meeting over Zoom calls and chatting about stuff and then outputting numbers from their guts? I will try to guide you through that. The session will be roughly structured as some forecasting advice and then diving into how we think and what we know about whether forecasting works, and then trying to bring it to, whether you should trust it and whether you should make your, career, the nation, or other decisions based on, whatever maybe via Samotsveti forecast or whatever you see on Metaculus or Good Judgment and or other forecasting platforms. Cool. Just very briefly, so we all have context. I'm talking about crowd forecasting. There is normally a platform where people can see a question. In this case, whether Russia will invade Ukraine before 2023, and people submit their numerical guesses, just numbers between 0 and 1, which represents their strength of their belief into whether the event will happen. And then these forecasting platforms takes a lot of guesses from a lot of different people, applies different fancy statistical tricks to them, and gives you kind of crowd forecast an aggregation, say a mean. Through this process, forecasters who do better, are more accurate, are rewarded using different proper scoring rules. Proper scoring rules are meant to keep them accountable, and they give proper incentives. So forecasters are incentivized to report their actual beliefs and not something else. This is the type of forecasting I will be mostly talking about. Well, I have quite a bit of. I've been doing forecasting for quite a while now. Some people might know about Samotsveti, which I co-run with Nuno, Eli, and Jonathan. And so sometimes people just come by and say, "Hey, Misha, how do I start forecasting? What's your advice?" This question is so complicated. I can't make up my mind about it. Where do you even begin? I will try to, say something about it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the more you practice, the better you become at something. Basically, no substitute for repetition. Just can register at any forecasting platform and forecast against the crowd at Good Judgment Open, Metaculus, or somewhere else. Or you might be using our tool from Sage, facebook.io, where you can register your individual forecast, which you might not want to share, which will be private to you. You can embed Facebook things into Google Docs, add it to your Slacks, and so on, so you can keep yourself accountable. Also at Sage, we have we build different exercises which give you a bit faster feedback loop to practice. And yeah, I think just like started, see how it goes. I really like starting doing it like 3 or 4 years ago with Nuno. We used to meet weekly to discuss the questions, and the social element was like really rewarding and nice. I would encourage also you to be a reflective thinker. Uh, I assisted with a forecasting course Jacob Steinhardt teaches at UC Berkeley. There is a link where like lecture notes with some of my comments. And one of the advice I kind of give is just like trying to notice why do you believe certain things, where your confidence in something or unconfidence might be coming from. Uh, yeah, and just through practice, through like noticing how different things feel, where your beliefs are, you will be able to just, be able to, course correct sometimes, not, over update on evidence which is not as strong and so on. Lastly, you can learn to like feel uncertainty, or the word I like to use is epistemic emotions. The concept is basically that, something which is very likely, feels one way, and something which is very unlikely feels another way. And there is a difference which you can, sense or smell. Uh, like you can sense or smell difference in, like taste of different coffees or different chocolates or wines. The more you, practice and the more attention you pay to how you feel about something, about the state of your knowledge and where your beliefs come from, the more nuanced understanding you get. You start getting a bit more like curious and you notice, these things don't feel right. And then you're like, huh, or like, or or do you really believe that? Really? Is it like that low? And through like these sensations which you can learn to interpret and like elicit within yourself, you can also just like learn where to look at, what your gut tells you about what's likely, or where your uncertainty lies, or where you might be, bullshitting yourself. As Feynman said, you are like the easiest person to bullshit and should be on lookout for that. Yeah, cool. All good advice, but it's kind of imprecise, and I just didn't went and didn't tell you to, like learn Bayesian statistics or anything. And the point I try to, you know, the the experience I had is that there is like no definite method or like the recipe you can follow to arrive at like statistical, or like to arrive at a, probability you'll be confident that. Uh, the different tasks look differently, feel differently. You need to, reason about them differently. And I will try to eliminate it like later on in my talk. But, what about Bayes race and outside view? Didn't Fetlock and, Good Judgment Project taught us that they are great. And yeah, they indeed great. They're like fantastic, absolutely fantastic. More Bayes rates, more trying to take outside perspective, like basing opinions, all seem quite helpful. But the questions also rise. How do you choose among the Bayes rates? If you're studying, there's a conflict will happen in a certain region. Are you using the regional statistics for that? Are you using global statistics? Are you using global statistics starting like 17th century? Are you using regional statistics only recent? Oh, but they have different like sample sizes because, there haven't been that many conflicts in like 20 years or like any protests. That's a question where we don't really have a good answer to. And I think a lot comes down to being appropriate in balancing these considerations of like having, greater sample size and more like on point reference class. And whenever you like came up with a reference class, while you did that, events have probably unfolded quite a bit. And now you like have a bunch of new considerations. And we don't even have any kind of base rate for them, or it's impossible to collect. Uh, um, you know, we're living this moment right now, and where we're industrial revolution, but where we're no, we're like some other transitions in human history, but uh, AI might be like indeed unprecedented, and it's a bit hard to, figure out how to base rate it against something. And the question I would like you to ask about base rates, which is kind of points back to the previous slide, being reflective. What makes you think that the base rates will work this time? Why is it the case where applying them seems good? We know from like fairly limited literature that, yeah, like better forecasters do that. But what type of questions do they forecast using this technique better? What type of mental moves they employ alongside base rates? That's all quite interesting and unclear. And I want you, I would love you to like, whenever you're trying thinking about base rates or outside view, just like asking yourself, how much is it? Is it appropriate? Is it a good tool for a job? Cool. But forecasting, there was like a bunch of literature, papers following Good Judgment Project and like some other endeavors. And there are like basically some hopes, I would say, which make it likely that like maybe forecasting works better, or actually good epistemic practice to like learn something about the future. It like broadly comes down to these four things. The first one is like setting proper incentives, making sure that forecasters are actually reporting you a truth and not whatever you want to hear from them, or zeros or ones because you're using like absolute scoring as opposed to quadratic or something. There is another factor which is like selecting people. Some people presumably better at forecasting than others. There were like some research which correlated, like initial assessment of participants of Good Judgment Project and determined that being open-minded helps. Being how do you call it? Not afraid of living like mental loops open helps. I think it's called. Anyways, being more intelligent helps. Aggregation seems to matter quite a bit and delivers results, especially for like crowds, making them like significantly more performant than naively you would guess. There have been also some studies into like training, like in particular debiasing, which showed people to improve in forecasting and their scores going down because you want to have lower square error. But these all things kind of don't really make sense, or in some questions, or in the questions we wanted to discuss. With incentives, I mean, it's very good with forecasting platforms. Make sure I will input the probability, I believe, but this is only the incentives which are like kind of structured as a box to the forecasting platform. There are like incentives outside the forecasting platform. Becoming a famous forecaster probably pays much more than just like your accuracy score. And yeah, this was discussed by Nuno and Alex in their paper, problem with like incentives and forecasting. And whenever I forecast at Summit Sveti, sometimes we don't record our predictions, or just like don't revisit them and don't like reassign the scores. And I never see people just like doing dishonest work. I think if you are committed, you're like interested in the subject, you're like an honest person, I think maybe that's enough. This selection, yeah, there were like some papers showing that like the super forecasters, their performance doesn't degrade, so it's not just regression to the mean kind of effects. That they not only like spend more time on questions, but even if they making like quick judgment, based judgment is better. So yeah, it seems like it matters, but for long-lasting questions about future of AI, it might be a bit hard to figure out who to trust to, and we don't have that many questions resolved, and some of these questions will resolve, close to, crunch time, or AI arrive, like general systems much more capable than the systems we have now arriving, and this makes this a little bit hard to track. Also, a bunch of these forecasting questions are correlated. If you're like a believer in like scaling hypothesis, you will probably, predict capabilities. How much should we reward you for that? Was it like just like one successful guess or like multiple? Aggregation seems good. Just, wisdom of ground seems to be a fact which replicates, but also, when I did literature review on like forecasting comparing generalists to experts, which we will discuss a bit later, I found that literature was like, surprisingly thin. So maybe, who knows? Uh, Training, there was like a lot of focus on debiasing and stuff, and it's a bit hard for me to like evaluate it subjectively. Partly because whenever I first read like Kahneman's book, I was pretty impressed, and yeah, it formed my beliefs quite a bit. And then now I recommend being reflective rather than just focusing on like cognitive biases and trying to avoid them. But yeah, in general, it seems like there are like some ways where better forecasters and like better group distinct themselves. And so there is like some hope that the forecast will be actually quite good. But how good they will be, what's the limits of our foresight, what can we aspire for here even. Um, I did some research comparing like generalist and forecasters. And this is the result from like one of the key studies made on Good Judgment Project. And you can see that, yeah, one takeaway from this study for me was that the famous claim about 30% edge advantage of forecasters compared to intelligence community was like comparing like Good Judgment Project like best algorithm to a prediction market. And if you compare like Good Judgment prediction market to ICPM, the intelligence community prediction market, you see that the edge they have is 10%, but like not 30%, a bit smaller. So that's interesting. Maybe claims are like, who knows. In another comparison which we have, you can also compare like scaled forecasters with like professionals who like self-selected to do forecasting and found time to do it amidst the pandemic, which was study was planned before that. And you can see that like forecasters perform like a little bit better and they have an edge. But when you aggregate like experts and like public health professionals, you get even better performance, and that's quite remarkable. This might mean that like the processes and like ideas which lead like forecasters and like public health professionals to do good are a bit uncorrelated, and yeah, they can learn from each other. And my overall like takeaway from like looking into this literature, especially for like complex fields like artificial intelligence or something, that you undeniably would need to dive pretty deep and like read a lot of epoch papers and other things to be good at understanding what's going on and be able to make good, reasonably calibrated and well-informed forecasts. We also looked into futurists at ARP. This work was mostly done by Gavin. And we found that some futurists make like somewhat impressive predictions and are like sometimes accurate when they propose a time frame and do things. It's a bit unclear what this tells us because we kind of didn't really have strong expectations on how we would perform before we did the study. But it seems that if you're like a futurist and like smart person who reads a lot and writes a lot of books, maybe you can make some good guesses. But also maybe you're like not Isaac Asimov, and then your guesses will be like kind of much less impressive, and there will be a bit more flops. In general, it seems that in our community, in the effective altruism community, there is like a little bit of epistemic over-reliance on forecasting. Forecasting kind of makes a promise that, oh, you need to put it on a platform and invite, like 5 friends of your friends to like input their hopefully good reasoning into it and aggregate it, and then you get clarity, you have situational awareness, you no longer suffer around how you should turn your career and like what you should be doing. But this feels a little bit, like falsely. Unfortunately, that's often not quite enough effort, especially on much more difficult questions. At Samosveta, we did a work for a client, and as part of it, we had like kind of natural experiment emerging. We registered our forecast just like based on like a few hours of chatting about the questions, and then I decided to like write a pretty lengthy report detailing my reasoning. So first of all, I can know what I think, because writing is great for that, and maybe to persuade others because I had some disagreements, and the forecasts changed quite dramatically after like people read my reasoning, and well, quite dramatically is a bit of a they changed some that on some questions like more than others, and maybe you indeed need to put like 50 hours of effort to like really dig into the details and present like good forecasting reasoning, and following that people would be able to make better informed forecasts. So maybe just like 5 friends are not enough, and maybe this like desire for just like being certain and um, getting information kind of quickly and just like deferring to crowd or somewhere comes from like I feel it comes from kind of anxious place, and I don't like it in particular, like don't really like it. Um, hmm. Yeah, there have been some studies, or we can like work on, you know, what do we even learn in theory? Like, science emerged. What was science? What's the scientific process? How did we get to know all the physics we know? Where, yeah, how the scientific consensus around these issues was built. And I think there have been like quite a lot of uh, naivety in, like public consciousness around these things. Um, for example, when you like look at the history of like Copernicus revolution and how we, started to live in like heliocentric world, uh, you know, epicycle, it wasn't obvious when there was like epicycles in both models. Some people, upheld this view on like, dubious metaphysical grounds, which we would argue were no better than like Church's ground to upheld heliocentrism and so on. Uh, if you read like against method, you know, you can just notice a pattern that like a lot of scientific discoveries and work is just not made, the same. There is no like A, B, C, D procedures you need to go through to, discover a double helix. It's quite, you know, in the thing you work. You just, you do what makes sense, you do what's right, you do what you need to do to, learn more about nature, and then you hopefully succeed. But yeah, no shared recipes. Well, uh, there is an excellent book, The Double Helix, which detailed how, which is autobiography, I think, which details how, the double helix was invented by Crick and Watson, and was like very messy. And you get to learn, but we just like, things weren't going that well. So we like some one of them spent the summer, like going to fancy diners. Uh, People published wrong theory just before that, like eminent chemisters. Your lab mates don't really like your work sometimes and just like don't believe in it. Yeah, it's a messy process, and like the more you learn about it, I think the better perspective it gives on how it would feel to like figure out, what the future will be in, the next 10 years right now, and probably quite messy. Yeah, if you look at history of like engineering methods, sometimes it like outpaced our ability to like explain things well, like quite a bit. We built all these, huge Gothic cathedrals, just like wow, absolutely gorgeous, impressive, amazing, uh, over generations, and we like stand well and aren't shaky, and it was done by through rules of thumbs and like other things where some might say like epistemic was a bit not at the best, but they still stand. There is like some desire to have what one might call like kind of high modernist approach. Just let us plan everything, let me conceptualize everything, let me bring these like three key variables, which are the most important ones, and not noticing like messy details. And sometimes this like fail, we know from seeing like a state that it fails quite dramatically, and sometimes like a local knowledge or just like input from um, other traditions of thinking and like local knowledge can like dramatically outperform what's been done. Quite a few bad cities have been built because of high modernism. Um, oops. Lastly, yeah, there is like this desire to, explain everything and maybe, put mathematical models where they don't belong and they don't clarify things. Just because we know that like mathematics is like has been such a powerful force in our physical understanding of nature doesn't mean that it can, helpfully explain like social situations or other things. But if your mimetic appeal is like very strong and uh, you know, science says that is a very strong argument to, be in a battle with someone. And well, maybe we should not be thinking about this as battles. Maybe we should like, relax and notice how knowledge is imprecise, how messy it is, and so on. Um, yeah, with that, I want to say thank you for attending the talk and happy to move to Q&A. Just to wrap up quite quickly, the advice, no substitute for reps, just like do your forecast, record them, be wrong, notice when you're wrong, be very wrong. I was very wrong sometimes. Yeah, be reflexive about how you approach it. Like try to, learn from experience more, try to figure out what made you predict that way, what's your beliefs are there. I think it's very interesting and like in its own way, but also quite helpful. And hopefully try to appreciate uncertainty, maybe solve some thinking physics problems and notice when you're like very lazy to, actually check whether the models work out or where you're like, yeah, it's something like that, whatever, fine. This is like quite, would be quite helpful in forecasting, but also in any kind of research endeavor in general. I think, the method of forecasting is imprecise. Whenever you face new challenges, you would need to come up with something new, as I think is the case with, other ways of knowing. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Oh, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Misha. We do have some
Thank you.
questions in the chat already, but just want to remind everyone who's watching this live stream that you can drop the questions at the live discussion panel at the swap card page. So the first question we have, so let's just get to it. First question we have is by Wes, and Wes is asking, is there some objective way to measure the validity of using base model calculations?
By
Is there some objective way to measure the validity of using
yeah,
base model calculations?
um, I'm not aware of them. There is like some things you can do. I mean, if you're training your model on a very few examples, then like in some sense, you will be more unconfident, and you can like have that. Uh, no, but in general, it seems that the way you measure things and like having a model, they come together, and it's like a bit hard to like disentangle the two. So I would lean towards saying no. But like in practice, some models you've been using like a lot, and they seem to make sense and nice, and they're nice, and and they work out. So keep using them, I guess.
Yeah. Misha, I'm seeing things that's happening in the live discussion and just want to flag for you that someone's asking about the URL link to your talk on epistemic emotions. So I just want you to know that wow, people are really excited for the stuff you have to show the internet. And we got some some clap emojis for you, Misha, in the
Yes,
audience. So
thank you.
someone thanked you especially for digging into the various shapes of skepticism. So that's so kudos for you. So
Thanks.
on to the next question. It's by
Just
Rishi.
quickly, I will share the
Yes,
slides, and the slides will have a link to the talk about epistemic emotions as well.
sure. That's wonderful, Misha. Would you like me to do that for you? I could drop it in the chat function,
Um,
or maybe it will be shared afterwards as well.
maybe let's do it later, so not to disrupt the
Sure,
flow.
sure. The next question is by Rishi. Rishi asks, this is a longer question, but Rishi was citing a journal, In Trade and the Journal of Prediction Markets. That's the name of the journal. Generated a lot of enthusiasm and survived the near death of all things internet circa 2000 or 2001, but nevertheless do not appear to have proved long lived at present. The question is, how should scholars balance the appeal and promise of production markets with the risk of misplacing their enthusiasm? Rishi was giving example, citing a source, for example, citing a source which ceases to exist. It's a graduate degree in, yeah, we can just go there, go to that question first. How should scholars balance the appeal and promise of production markets with the risk of misplacing their enthusiasm?
Right. Um, yeah, quite often prediction markets should be just like one among many like sources of evidence and reason you're using. Um, I think, there is like a question as a scholar who like publishes scientific works and cites things, and as a kind of curious explorer who like wants to learn about the world, how you do the things. Um, as a scholar, maybe you want to, put things onto archive.ph or any other archiving platform, and this would like make the link not go away. I'm not sure whether you're able to justify the crowd predictions in the literature. I think there are like some ML papers which cite predictions on hypermind made for the project of like Jacob Steinhardt. So probably. As a curious person, well, it's always a question about, how strongly you want to know the answer and the truth. For some questions, you just like, find this like, this is what like some smart people on the internet say, and it's okay. And then just like glimpse on Metaculus, glimpse on, manifold or whatever, and use it. For some other questions, you are like really, really want to know the answer, and you're willing to, spend some time doing your own research. And you might read the prediction markets and the discussion there and like find that it points to some things you haven't considered, and that's useful. And you can also read like, techno-economical reports about the possibility of some technology and find them maybe also informative and other things. And then in the talk about epistemic emotions, let me, like prop it up even a little bit more. Um, I kind of like doing the thing where, um, okay, cool. I have this like forecasting statement or like research statement. Like, is this conclusion or like intermediate conclusion like rings true to me? And sometimes you just like feel, uh, not really. There's like something off, and if you just like lean into this like something off, you can be just like, nah, I think it's can be overruled by this or that, and you like go and explore more. Maybe making a prediction market question if that seems like the most useful way, or maybe just like trying to Google around or like asking language models, or thinking for yourself. Yeah, I think it's also I will just like kind of note that it's pretty important, I think, to just like look at the what's actually happening without too much abstraction and just like actual you know um, data ground truth or whatever which can inform you, because it's a bit risky to like stay on the level of like aggregated opinions and opinions of about opinions. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We do have quite some time left. And looks like
Sure.
I have some time for my own questions. So I'm pretty excited to
Fantastic.
have the spotlight to ask you more personal questions. Like I couldn't really find much. Misha, you're engaged in a lot of projects. I'm personally curious about uh where that ambition, where that drive is coming from for you. I'm just more curious about, your career pathway. Maybe you could share about how you got to where you're at and like what kind of drives the decision making process for the career paths that the path that you're doing right now.
Oh, that's a big topic.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, if I will try to like summarize through things kind of briefly. Um,
Take
yeah,
it take it however you want. Take
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah,
however you want
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Um, yeah, I learned about, existential risk and like risk from AI a bunch of years ago. And, it felt very real and like scary and interesting. And I started engaging more with the community online by reading the forum. And at some point, I met people in person. I think my first kind of event was the second AI safety camp. And I made a lot of good friends there who I'm still in touch with now. Um, and starting from them, I started like getting a bit more and more, engaged in different forms. Did a fellowship and was like doing, some research on a grant or like on a site. And at some point, it felt like, probably the best thing to do is just like ask around for however I can like support people for research, and that's how Gavin and I started ARP. And more projects started, more things started. With like expertise in forecasting, you like sometimes get upset at things when they're like not done the way you think is right or something, and you just like want to do something about it. And this is how Eli and I and Aaron started Sage. Right now, I think the question I'm kind of asking myself is, a little bit Kantian, I would say. I just like ask myself, what's the right thing to do, and whatever I like feel the right thing to do is what I'm going to do next, or like the projects or areas I'm going to work on next. This is how I presently like prioritize things, I would say.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for sharing that, Misha.
Yeah, sure.
I'm personally curious more about what is there like a specific forecasting that you got really wrong about? I'm pretty sure like you were talking a lot about repetition and practicing. I'm curious what were some of your personal biggest like forecasting blunders yourself, if you can share.
Yeah. Um, it was, I think, March or like April of 2021, and there was like the first build-up of like Russian forces at Ukrainian border, and I myself am Russian and was living in Moscow at the time. Uh, and before that, like friend asked me, what's the probability of like invasion within a year? He was living in Poland and was, afraid it's like spilling over to where. And I gave some reasonable numbers. I think it was like, 15 or something plus percent based on, base rates and, stuff. Uh, and then like Biden called Putin, I think, a killer or something. And there was a question on Good Judgment Open, which was something like, oh gosh, was there will be like a summit between Putin and Biden within a year? Because it was like kind of common for the leaders of two countries to have a summit, whenever there is incumbent. Uh, and I was like, well, this feels unlikely right now, or just like feels very strange. And then I heard that there was a call proposing the summit, and I kind of was waiting for a friend, and I checked New York Times or something, and I just like saw this as a front page news, and I was like, what's going on? I was like at 3%, and now I'm jumping immediately at least 2/3 because it was not yet confirmed or something. And this like 20x error, felt so huge, and honestly, it like sort of put me into this like anxiety spiral. I'm not very prone to them, and like can be like pretty detached from the events which are going on. But at the time was just like a little bit overwhelmed because there is a build up. I think it's risky, but probably not exceedingly risky, at least as of now, with evidence we have and like how these things like tend to escalate. And now, wow, there's like a reason to, do such a summit or a call. And I was a little bit freaking out. And I was like, oh, wow. I messaged my friends and like was like figuring out whether I should like immediately, leave the country or something. Uh, yeah, this was the biggest, I think one of the biggest mistakes in
Blunder.
terms of
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
the
Making your
rates.
own
Yeah,
prediction. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Misha. It probably it's I hope that count could inspire others to like forgive themselves or people make errors and the repetitions is
Oh,
what matters.
definitely. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. We do have a few more questions coming in.
Fantastic.
So
Let's go.
the next question is from Vincent. Vincent did come late. But how can someone get into forecasting? I know you mentioned that in your slides already. Perhaps like a quick summary would be sufficient. Um, or you could try answering the other question that he asked, which is, what is the overlap between statistics and forecasting?
Yeah, guessing into forecasting. Well,
Maybe three top tips because I
okay.
understand
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
Misha's gonna
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
sharing the slides
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess there is something you're interested about, something which, matters to you, and you can like register their predictions about these things. And they can like pretty arbitrary. They can be, you know, whether you will wake up on time tomorrow or whether you will enjoy the, your EAGx talk tomorrow or something. This is one option. Another option, if you just like want to get more into geopolitical forecasting or on other platforms, I kind of like the selection of questions on CSAT, and we at Samasvet like participated quite actively in the first few seasons. So maybe register there, find another friend who wants to learn a bit more about forecasting. I think Nuno and I, yes, we're like selecting 1 or 2 questions per week to discuss, and it brings a lot of like, a little bit competition between you and your friend, and you're just like, aha, you didn't notice these considerations. Aha, see what question I spotted, it's so mispriced. Wow, how people can be so wrong. And this like makes it much more fun, at least to me. So I would recommend like doing these things.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And the
That's like
second
a
question
very
was about
sound.
statistics, right?
Yes, the second question
Was
is
this
about what's the overlap between statistics and forecasting? Maybe like a 15-second version answer for it.
Sure. Knowing statistics is good. I know some super forecasters who have no like mathematical training of these sorts. When you do Bayes rates, you just like divide one number by another number. It's like not that difficult. I think sometimes, doing things helps. If you can amass big data sets and find patterns where, like use whatever technique seems the best. In some sense, what machine learning does in like different like tech companies is, just that. In the questions where you like have less information, like don't have too many trends to extrapolate, you'll be much more reliant on your like intuition and kind of good sense and like this like feeling of uncertainty. And statistics might be useful, but you should take it into account but maybe not over update on it.
Yeah. So, speaking of super forecasting, I
Uh-huh.
just dropped it in the Swapcard chat, just to recommend the audience to check out Slate Star Codex blog, reviewing what they reviewed this book, Super Forecasting, and it
Uh-huh.
does go into a bit of like going into a bit more of the surprising skill sets or things that you don't actually are as essential when it comes to forming good judgment. So I recommend audience to check out that blog. Slate Star Codex book review on super forecasting. The next question we have is from Jay, and it is a similar question, roughly a similar question. So maybe Misha, you could add something else to your previous answer. But for someone who's very new to forecasting, how can someone start integrating integrating forecasting into different aspects of their life and into the decisions that they make? I suppose this question is coming from a spirit of how can we make forecasting even more entrenched in our lives, Misha?
Yeah. Well, I would need to be very honest with that. I tried, making a bunch of predictions about things in my life, and then I stopped. And so I'm probably not an authority on this topic. I think nonetheless, the forecasting spirit is much more versatile than just putting numbers on things, partly because putting numbers on things sometimes requires you to, things to be either shaped one way, like whether I will get this mark on this test, which are very specific, or yeah, it requires kind of decontextualization of things. You want to learn something about, compute progress, and when you ask a question about like this weird benchmark and like how much things will cost and it's volatile and it's like messy and it's like not so nice. Um, but the spirit of forecasting like persists. As I, mentioned in talk, what I like to do is kind of trying to like sense the question, and you might have a personal decision or like research topic you're doing it, and you'd be like, does it feel right to me? Am I, willing to bet, all my, never bet all your money, as we learned, unfortunately. But maybe, am I willing to do Kelly betting on that? Right? It's a bit more safe. Yeah, just like lean into this question, and it's like it feels no when like, well, why doesn't it feel no? And there might be a fear you have, which is super normal. Like maybe I can give a grant making example. I had some grant making experience in my life, and you see a grant, and you just like, oh wow, this is fantastic grant. Like obviously should be done. Personally, super competent. Yeah, just like boom. And there is like, well, you're something about long-term future and you're evaluating, I don't know, like cat shelter. Well, maybe it's not a good fit for us, just like no. And sometimes it's like, well, it makes sense, but I'm unsure. And when you're like, why am I unsure? and you're like, what sort of action I can make to reduce uncertainty, to like lean into the fear, and there is a fear, and you're just like, well, I'm not sure the team can do it, and then you're like, okay, cool, what can I do about my fear of like team not doing it? How can I, figure it out? And it's like, well, I can have a call with them instead of just reading their application, or I can ask for references, or maybe there should be a work trial first. Yeah, so this kind of spirit of noticing your epistemic state and like how you feel and like why did you arrive on your beliefs can be just like quite generally employed, and there is no requirement to put numbers of things all the time, and I don't do that.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive answer, Misha. Thanks for covering the basis. I
Sure.
think we'll have time for the second last question, and I'll ask you one last question. So the second last question I ask is this is I'm just gonna weave someone called Sandstone. They ask a question. Uh, what is the field of forecasting missing? How could it be improved? What's promising about it? Any future research directions? So in my I like to weave my own question, which is what are some new developments you're excited about in your field? What's the field of forecasting missing? How could it be improved? What's the future research directions?
Interesting. Hmm. I think I would be more excited to have like a scene of people thinking about like what's the future of AI is, uh, and just like doing more things together about that. I think like scenes have been very powerful in development of uh, any new fields. And I think this is right now kind of missing, where like individual groups which sometimes collaborate and do things, but there is no, like active, coherent, screaming at each other and like trying to outdo each other and like be more cool and more fancy. So that's what I kind of personally feel might be missing right now. Uh, in terms of developments, I can like maybe like I I work on Stage, which is kind of non-profit, which does some of tools and stuff. And so whenever I had good ideas, I tried to like make them go through it, which I think there is more need for like noticing and explaining AI progress and like making the comparison like kind of very ground level as opposed to relying on like benchmarks and their interpolation. Because like benchmarks, I don't know. I spent a bunch of hours thinking about like math benchmark, and I still don't really know what's the questions are, like what's the difficulty, what's the intrinsicness to it. And we did a tool about that called the AI Digest, I think, .org. Um, I also hope that, forecasting user experience will be improved. Like Manifold showed us that if you have good user experience, then you can make your pro platform very active. We also at Sage built the Fatebook, which you can embed as your Slack workspace or put things into Google document and like turn them into forecasts. And I think this convenience just like pretty helpful for broader adoption. Yeah,
That sounds like a exciting project. Next project for Misha,
thanks.
I suppose. So Misha, we're down to the last minute. I'm gonna ask the final question. And unfortunately, I couldn't get to other people's questions. Folks. Thanks for sending in the questions. So the last question I have for you, Misha, is yeah, any recommended final action or takeaway that you like to impart or like to really, really emphasize again? I know you already emphasized on your last slide, but a second last
Yeah,
slide, but just one, yeah,
yeah.
maybe like a rally call or like something to, yeah,
Right. I
yeah,
don't know, folks. Like do more reps, figure out how good you are at your like reasoning about future stuff. Uh, you know, be a bit skeptical, be a bit, like hungry for truth. Uh, just like be less maybe anxious, less deferring, and more like trying to feel how you think and like what you think and where it leads you. Ask yourself, how do I know it? And like, yeah, these sort of things. Uh, I think it's quite important for the community to have like healthy thinking, and we might not have it in some areas, and this would be pretty sad.
okay,
Uh, Thanks a lot. It
okay,
was a pleasure to give a talk, and thanks for asking so many good questions.
yeah. With that, folks, we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for sending in the questions. Big shout out, big thank you to Misha for their time. You've been a wonderful speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah.